The sun was a shy visitor that morning, draping the neighborhood in a soft, golden light that promised a day both ordinary and extraordinary. My garden, a canvas of colors and textures, swayed gently in the breeze. Among its performers, the wind spinner, a gleaming sculpture of metal and whimsy, danced, catching the light with a grace only nature could rival. This wind spinner wasn't just a decoration. It was a tribute to my late husband, a man who found beauty and simplicity and joy in the mundane. It spun memories and whispered echoes of laughter, casting kaleidoscope reflections across the garden paths. It was a beacon of peace and nostalgia, until Karen, the homeowners association, cloaked in its usual bureaucracy, had a voice. And that voice was Karen. She had a penchant for rules and a heart that seemed to beat in time with her complaints. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the neighborhood as if seeking imperfections to iron out. Her lips perpetually poised to twist into disapproval. She started small. A frown here, a sniff there. Her disdain for my wind spinner was palpable, a silent storm gathering strength. I watched her from my window, her silhouette framed in the morning light. Her presence was an uninvited shadow at the edge of my peaceful sanctuary. The first letter came unexpectedly, wrapped in sterile white and punctuated with officious warnings. The words danced with the rigidity of rules: non-compliant structure, property aesthetics, and immediate removal. Irony dripped from every line, for the neighborhood bore flaws far larger than my humble tribute. Such absurdity. I chuckled, a sound swallowed by the morning air. I had no quarrel with conformity, but this was something else, a challenge, a test of resolve. And so, I responded not with argument, but with serenity. I welcomed the morning sun with gratitude, tended to my garden with renewed vigor, and let the wind spinner continue its hypnotic dance. It spun tales of resilience and whispered defiance to the wind. A peaceful protest, silent and unwavering. Neighbors noticed, their nods of approval a quiet symphony of support. The spinner, it seemed, had become our communal spirit, a silent rebellion wrapped in metallic hues. Karen's eyes bore holes into my resolve, but I remained still, my roots planted firmly in the soil of patience. My thoughts meandered like the paths of the garden, considering the absurdity of control. How strange that, in the pursuit of order, some find chaos. Karen's actions were not unexpected, but rather the overture to a symphony she did not realize she was conducting. And so, the wind spinner spun, reflecting both sunlight and the absurdity of a world ruled by petty grievances. I watched it from my window, its dance an ode to quiet defiance and the power of peace. The days were long, the fight silent, and yet I found solace in the knowledge that change was as inevitable as the turning seasons. In the end, it was just a wind spinner, but its message was a tempest, brewing silently beneath the surface of our suburban lives. I waited, patient as the earth, knowing that sometimes the best response to pettiness is simply to let your own truth spin freely in the wind. The morning sun draped the neighborhood in its familiar golden embrace. The air was crisp, vibrant, and filled with the gentle whir of 100 wind spinners catching their first breath of the day. It was a symphony of color and motion, a rebellion made beautiful by the simplicity of its execution. Each yard a participant in the silent upheaval against the tyrannical reign of Karen, the self-appointed arbiter of aesthetic decency. Karen was not one to let such insolence pass unchallenged. Her anger was a living thing, palpable and as consuming as a wildfire. It was no surprise when the HOA letters began to arrive, their envelopes stiff with formality, their contents dripping with the venom of petty authority. They contained absurdities dressed as regulations, mandates about grass lengths, flower varieties, and yes, the immediate removal of unauthorized wind spinners. The irony was thick. Our neighborhood, once a haven of suburban tranquility, was now a battlefield. Karen was the general, her clipboard a weapon, her minions the unwitting soldiers. The letters were merely the opening salvo. I could almost hear her gloating as I read the ridiculous missives. She who demanded conformity at the cost of creativity, she who saw our quiet defiance as a personal affront. My smile widened at the thought of her dismay when each neighbor, in their own quiet rebellion, responded with passive resistance. Spinners stayed put, gleaming defiantly in the sun. The gossip began to swirl like leaves in a storm. Karen's whisper campaign was as predictable as it was ineffective. Rumors of fines, threats of legal action, and tales of homeowners' meetings filled the air, each exaggerated, retelling another attempt to stoke fear. But fear never took root. Instead, it became a source of humor, a shared inside joke among neighbors who had grown weary of her tyranny. I'd predicted her next move, an emergency HOA meeting, cloaked in the guise of concern for property values and neighborhood pride. She'd stand at the podium, skin stretched taut over bones of indignation, eyes glittering with the gleam of righteousness. Her voice would carry over the room, each word a carefully aimed dart of disapproval. My presence, an affront to her sanctimonious diatribe. Yet, I was calm. A quiet strength settled within me, an understanding of the power of community when bonded by a common adversary. We were stronger together, our collective will a force more potent than any letter or whispered threat. The meeting room was a battlefield of a different kind. Karen's eyes sought mine, a challenge lingering in the air between us. Words tumbled from her lips, yet I heard only the rustling of leaves in a gentle breeze. A single thought flitted through my mind. Resistance is its own reward. In that moment, her power was an illusion, as fragile as the paper on which her citations were printed. The meeting was not the triumph she had envisioned. It was simply another act in a play where the protagonist remained steadfast, unyielding. As I walked home, the spinners caught the dying light of day, a chorus of rotating rainbows bidding the sun farewell. They were a testament to a neighborhood united not by defiance alone, but by the simple joy of standing together. In the face of an HOA Karen, we had found our voice, and it was as clear and unwavering as the breeze that set our spinners in motion. The sun slipped beneath the horizon, casting a dusky glow over the neighborhood. I watched from my window, the sky a canvas of fading oranges and purples. A quiet descended, heavy with the anticipation of another day closing. Yet, the weight pressing on my chest didn't ease. I knew it was time. After Karen's latest HOA newsletter, with its thinly veiled threats of community standards, I had decided enough was enough. My wind spinner had become public enemy number one, its sinuous dance apparently capable of unraveling the fabric of our community. So, I documented everything. Every passive-aggressive note. Every rule bent to her will. Each seemed insignificant alone, but together they painted a portrait of one woman's crusade against harmless joy. The notebook became a companion, pages filled with italicized dates and times, snapshots of my quiet rebellion, words etched with patience, the ink a trail of my resolve. It was time to prepare my counter, not with fury, but with a subtlety that danced under the radar, much like my beloved spinner in the breeze. I moved through the neighborhood after dusk, the cooling air whispering against my skin, each step a part of the rhythm of this quiet life. The homes all stood in orderly rows, the lawns manicured to regimented perfection, Karen's kingdom of conformity. The installation of the wind spinners had been an exercise in stealth and cunning, each one nestled into its new home with the gentle persuasion of a late-night conspirator. It wasn't vandalism, it was a gift, a promise of whimsy dotting the uniformity. Each spinner a silent sentinel, spinning tales against the mundane backdrop. I returned to my porch, observing my handiwork. The darkness hid the vibrant colors for now, but the morning would reveal them in all their glory. It was a calculated move, not of aggression, but a gentle nudge in a world too rigid. I sipped my coffee and waited for the neighborhood to wake. The next day broke in a symphony of colors, the wind giving life to the spinners. Neighbors emerged, eyes widening in bemusement and delight. Even the most stoic faces softened at the sight. Karen would notice. Her iron grip on the neighborhood would slip, just slightly, as laughter and curiosity took root. There was a beauty in this small rebellion, a ripple effect that would make its way through the community with each turn of the spinners. No direct confrontation, just a gentle reminder that life needed color, unpredictability. It was an invitation to smile, to let go. A chance for Karen to see that not all change was ominous. As the day wore on and the community buzzed with whispers and chuckles, I felt a shift within me. A quiet triumph, not for one-upping Karen, but for having kindled a hint of magic in a place grown too concerned with order. In the weeks that followed, the spinners continued their dance. I watched from my window, the colors twirling in the breeze, each a testament to resilience. It was a new chapter for the neighborhood, a page slowly turning. Maybe Karen would come around. Maybe she wouldn't. But that no longer mattered. The spinners spun on, indifferent to opinions, and in their carefree rotation, they carried with them an undeniable truth, that life, in its simplest forms, is a dance worth partaking in. Even amidst the most stubborn of winds, the cool breeze was a whispered promise as it danced through the neighborhood, ruffling the vibrant array of wind spinners now adorning every lawn. Each one was a defiant declaration against HOA Karen's iron grip, a whimsical rebellion spinning in sync with the autumn leaves. With each turn, they seemed to mock her attempts to control every detail of our lives. Yet, beneath this colorful defiance lay a quieter, more calculated plan. I had spent the past weeks in a diligent silence, poring over the HOA's bylaws with the kind of focus usually reserved for ancient, complex texts. There, hidden beneath layers of vague legalese and stifling regulation, I found the key to my quiet revolution. Obscure clauses, overlooked by those too eager to wield power, offered unexpected freedoms, loopholes that allowed for art installations, garden decor exceptions, and personal property rights. Karen, in her fervor to command, had never been one for the fine print. Her obsession with control had blinded her to the nuances that could unravel her empire. I took my findings to the monthly HOA meeting, a gathering that usually felt more like a sentencing than a community discussion. The room, adorned in muted tones and uncomfortable chairs, buzzed with the low hum of anticipation. The spinner's gentle whirl was barely audible, but ever present, a constant reminder of the change that had already begun. As the meeting commenced, my heart beat a steady rhythm, confidence, subtle yet unwavering. I calmly presented my case, laying out each clause with meticulous care. The board members listened, their expressions shifting from indifference to intrigue. Even Karen's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. A single line of dialogue cut through the formality, sharp and undeniable. Karen, cornered and desperate, whispered her disbelief. This can't be. Her words, meant to intimidate, instead underscored her vulnerability. Her grip was slipping, the power she craved dissipating like mist under a rising sun. The realization sparked a quiet satisfaction within me. I had not only neutralized her influence but transformed it into a catalyst for community change. The bylaws, once a tool of oppression, now became a shield for creativity and freedom. As the meeting concluded, the neighbors exchanged glances, a shared understanding passing silently between them. Unity forged from defiance, resilience born from quiet courage. The wind spinners, once symbols of my personal vendetta, had evolved into emblems of a collective spirit. Walking home, I noticed the subtle shift in the air. The tension that had once hung like an oppressive fog was lifting, replaced by a sense of possibility. Each wind spinner caught the breeze, their kaleidoscope of colors painting the neighborhood anew. Karen, stripped of her imagined kingdom, would have to face the reality of a community that refused to be subdued, a community that found strength in its diversity, joy in its individuality. And though she might never fully accept this change, the rest of us had already moved on, carried forward by the endless soothing spin of the wind. The morning sun filtered through the swaying branches, painting dappled patterns on the sidewalks. Each house stood armed with its own wind spinner, spinning joyously in the gentle breeze. The air felt lighter, as if everyone collectively exhaled a breath they didn't know they were holding. The neighborhood had transformed, a gallery of whirring sculptures, vibrant and rebellious, each one a silent protest, a declaration of independence from the tyranny of HOA Karen. Her reign as the self-appointed queen of conformity was crumbling like an old cookie. Walking through the streets, I felt a quiet satisfaction. I had become the orchestrator of a revolution, the unexpected hero of our cul-de-sac. My own spinner, gleaming in the center of my yard, seemed to nod approvingly as its blades caught the light. Karen was nowhere in sight. Her presence, once so suffocating, seemed to evaporate like morning mist. The community thrived in her absence, neighbors chatting over white picket fences, laughing children chasing one another through open lawns. The spinners had become our emblem, a small but potent symbol of unity and defiance. I paused in front of Karen's house, the last bastion of her dwindling empire. It stood silent, its meticulously manicured exterior now a relic of a forgotten order. No spinner twirled here. The absence was striking, a void in a sea of movement. Quietly I wondered if she watched from behind her pristine curtains, her steel gaze softened by the inevitable change she couldn't control. Maybe, just maybe, she was learning something about the unpredictable nature of people and wind and life itself. A soft rustle caught my attention, drawing my gaze to a figure approaching from the side. It was Tom, the quiet neighbor from down the street, known mostly for his remarkable garden and gentle demeanor. He stopped beside me, eyes on Karen's house, his expression thoughtful. He nodded toward her door, a small, wry smile playing on his lips. Sometimes, a storm can clear the air. His voice was almost a whisper, easily lost to the wind, but it carried weight, a simple truth wrapped in metaphor. A silent understanding passed between us. The storm had indeed passed, leaving a clearer sky, and in its wake, the community stood stronger, bound by the simple act of standing up for the beauty of individuality. Karen's story had slipped into the background, no longer the headline in our day-to-day lives. The neighborhood had moved on, embracing a newfound harmony. As I continued my walk, a sense of peace washed over me, akin to the feeling of a jigsaw puzzle finally fitting into place. The wind spinners twinkled in the sunlight, each one dancing to its own rhythm, a reminder of the colorful chaos of life that Karen had once tried to tame. I arrived back at my house, the door welcoming me like an old friend. I paused, looking back at the street now alive with a quiet hum of activity. It felt right, balanced, a community restored to its rightful state, with or without Karen's approval. The wind picked up, swirling around me, and I took a deep breath, feeling its coolness against my skin. My wind spinner caught the current, spinning gently, a small act of rebellion that had grown into something much more. I smiled to myself, stepping inside. The world outside continued its dance, unyielding and free.